Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got a fantastic guest for the audience today, Thomas Blattenberger. He's founder of Paradigm Shift Financial. He's a financial planning. He also helps entrepreneurs and clients talk about mindset and talk about how to actually keep the money, how to invest it, how to save it, how to multiply it. He's a great addition to the show, and I'm really happy to have him on. So, Thomas, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we had a great discussion beforehand and just talk about how you got started and what you do. And I'm really excited to dive into the conversation.
Awesome. Where do you want to start? You tell me.
Your background and how and why you started Paradigm Shift and what you do, and that'll set the stage for everything.
Sure. Okay. I've been in the financial industry for 15 years now. And every few years, I basically restart. What I mean by that is I take something that's working and I break it to make it work better. And so for the first 8 years, I was in the industry with an insurance company, predominantly insurance. We did everything, but predominantly insurance. And around the 7-8 year mark, I realized what we were doing in the investment space wasn't really working. It wasn't really helping people. And what was really difficult for me was I'm a tinkerer. I like knowing things, just to know things. So I got my CFP. I passed the test when I was 21 years old, and I've been in the industry since college. And I've learned everything there is to know not everything, excuse me, not everything there is to know, but I've learned a lot about like mortgages and insurance strategies and business buyouts and business selling and just all the different kinds of things you can learn about. But when it came to investing, if someone asked me how markets worked at the old firm, I didn't have an answer. I couldn't actually tell them why investments would do what they were doing, if they were doing well, why they were doing well, if they were doing poorly, why they were doing poorly. And that always sat weird with me because I understood all this other stuff. I could explain it, but I couldn't ever articulate an explanation of markets. And then I attended a 2-day session called the American Dream Experience that basically rocked my world. In 2 days, I learned more about the scientific application of money management and investments than I had learned in my whole career. And it was like, oh crap. No wonder it's never made sense, because all we've ever done is gamble and speculate and make predictions. And you can't consistently do that. So that's why I've never understood it. So I went back to my old firm and I said, listen, we need to start teaching this stuff. And they said, but Thomas, if we start teaching this stuff, people aren't going to buy the insurance products that protect them from the thing that you're teaching. You're shooting yourself in the foot. And I went, oh, okay, cool. Got it. Not my business model. I don't want to do it that way. So this was around 2018 or 2017. I left and I founded Paradigm Shift with a partner. Now just me as the founder. And ever since then, it's just been really tinkering with how do people think about money and how does the science of money work? It's probably the most amazing thing that I've seen is you can teach, like, it's the question of why can you teach someone all the strategies that there are and then have them not take action? And it must be that the mindset that someone has is more powerful than the knowledge that they acquire. And so if you can deal with mindset, then you can teach knowledge. But if you don't have a mindset that works, no knowledge will make a difference. And that's probably personally for myself and for clients, it's probably been the biggest insight and the biggest deep dive I've done in the last 6 years.
Interesting. It's because it sounds like I've talked to a lot of people in the financial space, planners, and one part I find is that a lot of people are branching out into kind of niche clients. And so you are saying like you are at the kind of forefront of this idea of more of this innovative and type of mindset way. So my question is, in this era, because there's a couple documentaries I've been recently watching, is we're in this hyper speculative kind of gambling. Everybody's looking for the next quick rich. And one is, why is that? And two, is it possible to build? Because a lot of Gen Z, for example, they're like, yeah, the old system that worked for boomers and kind of Gen Xers a little bit, the older Gen Xers, that worked, but it's not going to work for me. Some people can't even afford houses and all
Yeah.
this. So what is your thoughts?
So there's a lot to unpack in that. There's a lot of different like avenues of questions. So the first piece is you're talking about you've talked to a lot of different people and there's a lot of different niches, if you will. Yeah, I think that what I'm talking about shouldn't be a niche though.
Mm,
I think it should be the mainstream, right?
yeah.
Money is woven through the fabric of every decision you'll ever make,
Hmm.
either directly or indirectly. There's not a single decision that is not colored by money.
Yeah.
And so the more you can understand how you operate around money, the
Oh,
more you can understand how you operate as a human.
mm,
And the biggest mistake that I could possibly see someone doing, and the industry's rampant with it, is if someone is in the mindset of scarcity
mm,
and then you deal with creating a plan, the plan is going to be scarcity based.
mhm,
Right? I don't want to go broke. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want this. Whereas if the opposite would be, what do you want? I want to be wealthy. I want to have financial freedom. I want to have choices. Those going for a plan around not being broke is much easier and much less rewarding than going for a plan around being wealthy, right? But it's a mindset. And most of the time, my experience is the planners and advisors are just order takers. You come in and you're like, what are your goals? Okay, cool. Here's the products you can buy to get those goals. You want to buy them
mhm.
through me? Okay, cool. I'll sell them to you. And then I really hope at some point one of my missions is that this isn't a niche. It becomes what the financial world looks like.
Mhm.
And then as far as the gambling piece, that's a hard one. It's really, if you look at the brain as a survival tool, right? The brain, for lack of a better definition or description, right? The base function of the brain is to have us as an individual and as a species survive.
Mm,
And so, what we have in our brains that's more powerful than any other species on the planet is the ability to reason through reasonable predictions of the future.
mm,
In caveman days, I see a saber-toothed tiger walk into a cave 3 times. I can reason out that it's probably going to go in there a fourth time, and that might save my life, right?
mhm,
So there's ways where the brain has a pattern of trying to predict the future that's really powerful. It keeps us alive. It keeps us surviving.
mhm,
But the jump from trying to predict the future around survival oriented actions to the jump around trying to predict the future around markets is unfounded. It's not even as unfounded, it's ridiculous as a premise,
mhm, mhm.
because now you're not just dealing with you. If I'm making a prediction of the future, I've got to, the only way my prediction is right is given supply and demand, is if there's enough other buyers or sellers that agree with me. And there's no way I can ever predict the buying aggregate decisions of everybody out there. And if you could, you'd be wealthier than Bezos. You'd be the world's first trillionaire if you could actually predict buying patterns and behaviors consistently of every person on the planet that impacts the price. So it's just, I think at this point it's one of those, gambling has always been on the fringes, right? People go to Vegas all the time. I'm from Hawaii originally,
Yeah.
and Vegas is called the ninth island. So a lot of people from Hawaii go to Vegas to gamble. And
Yeah.
so it's always been a fringe thing. But with the advent of technology and the cell phone in your pocket where you can do 24/7 trading and activities, I think it's just becoming it's becoming more the norm, and that needs to shift because it's just going to
Mhm.
keep hurting people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting because, like I said, we'll talk about the American dream. And one thing I have for you is, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts on the American dream for Gen Z and millennials? What does that look like? Like for boomers and the older Gen X, it's like American dream is 50 years at a job, retire, golden, and then you got a white house, you got a large house, wife, kids, vacations, car. But what does the American dream look for Gen Z and millennials when you work with clients?
I think the first piece is actually getting clear on where the American dream comes from. Like we use it pretty, sorry, I have something in my eye. We use it pretty loosely, like a kind of a predefined thing, right? Oh, the American dream. Oh, the American dream. But there's a lot of power in getting curious about when did we start using that, and where did that come from? And what it traces back to, the first time it's used in literature is in a book by someone named James Truslow Adams in 1931 called The Epic of America. And he's basically commenting, it's commentary on why America is experiencing so much prosperity, even in the midst of the Great Depression, by comparison to Europe. And what he said was the American dream is a dream of a land in which life is better and richer and fuller for everyone. And that we're each according to their own abilities and merits, not from some predestined or predetermined, like a caste system where you're born into it, where America is a place that you truly can create the life that you want. And I still believe that's the case. So what does the American dream look like for Gen Z? Whatever they want it to look like. It's, at the end of the day, it's a way to see the world. If I wake up and choose the idea that I can create a life that's better and richer and fuller for myself and others, it gives me places to look to go about creating that. Whereas if I get up and go, the world owes me something, why don't I have XYZ? Why isn't this way? Why isn't that person? That's going to give me other actions to take that probably aren't going to be as powerful. So I think the American dream, really, the most powerful way it could be chosen is as a screen, as a way to view the world, and as an individualized, each person chooses theirs.
Very powerful. That's actually the first time someone else, I have something in my eye too, but it's the first time somebody has actually said, because we have these powerful images and representations from like media and society, like this is the way life should be. And we all know that's not the case anymore. And so I really love what you said is what you choose it to be. It's like freedom, and now there's time, location, health, financial, all the emotional freedom. And then those are the freedoms and ideals that you choose. Very powerful.
One other thing to add to that real quick is just the reason that's so powerful is because of what you said. The media is always giving us things to compare against. So you may feel like you've got something, you're adequate, you got the nice house, you worked your butt off to get that house, and you turn on the TV and you see some images of something else and you're like, it's not that house. And so that's the other powerful piece of it is, if you can create your version of the American dream and then you live it, there's always the ability to enjoy it as it expands and builds versus constantly comparing against bigger, better, other versions of it, which is probably the biggest reason most people experience so much difficulty and so much lack of fulfillment.
Yeah, the other question I have for you is kind of the spending habits of Gen Z and millennials. And what I found very interesting is that they'll spend more on, for example, for a cup of coffee that's environmental friendly or that's kind to groups and like that resonates with their values and ideals. They'll spend $10 on a coffee versus whereas other generations would be like, oh, $10 for a coffee, I'm not gonna, or like Gen Z will be like, I'm not working for this company and this corporation is corrupt, its leaders are biased and doesn't resonate. How are you seeing that in your clientele?
That's a really good question. So I guess I would say the way I'm seeing that in my clientele is, there's a way to deal with that powerfully, right? And then there's a way to deal with it, let's say, not so powerfully. So let's just look at the powerful way. That's exactly what you would want and expect in a more freer market capitalistic society, where people can use their dollars to align with what's important to them. And so the most interesting thing that I find myself teaching younger, it's weird to say younger, I'm not young anymore, it sucks. But it's what I find myself teaching, let's call them the younger generation, is what you think is missing in capitalism is actually available to you in capitalism. The fact that you can spend $10 on a coffee and it makes a difference for your carbon footprint is a function of a bunch of capitalists coming together and figuring out how to serve something that was important to you and getting ingredients from across the world and doing fair trade programs where the people that grow it in some third world country are paid comparable wages for having it. That's the amazing a marvel of capitalism. And so that's I think that's the main thing, is the money is meant to be circulated. It's meant to be used. If you care about the environment and you care about it to the point you want to spend it on a $10 coffee, great. Just be aware that it's a function of a system called capitalism, and that the more you can embrace it instead of hate on it, the better life works for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other piece, is redefine. What most people hate isn't capitalism. Most people hate bureaucracy. They just don't realize it's not capitalism, like
Yeah.
government bailouts or corporate socialism. Well, that's not capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? Even patents technically aren't capitalism, because it restricts the ability of fair competition. So
Interesting.
this is the kind of stuff that we teach and so it makes me popular among certain people and not popular among others people, whatever.
Yeah. It's really
I tend to be popular with anybody who's willing to have a dialogue and open-minded.
Yeah.
If you're not open-minded, I'm not a good person for you.
Which it's interesting, because moving on is what I also found very interesting along the Gen Z cohort, especially when their finances is, again, would kind of harp on this. They would rather not have a job and like drive for Lyft or Uber or DoorDash or just go on the social media and find their tribe, versus work for a company that they don't believe in, or that they just feel like they're a cog in the wheel. So how does that affect your coaching and those types of ideals?
See, I don't think that in and of itself isn't something that necessarily needs to be coached to. It's actually, again, a perfect example of the power of capitalism, is the ability to say, you know what, I don't want to do a corporate America job, but I really enjoy gaming. And people tell me I'm funny and I'm interesting and they like to watch my stuff. You know what, why don't I hire some people to help me create content for other people to, oh, whoa, I'm making 5 figures a month now creating video game content. I think that's exactly what you want in a capitalistic society, is the freedom to choose unique and quirky, let's call them, job opportunities that enrich you and others. The problem can tend to, and this goes again with the scarcity and the mindset, where people tend to see the problems of capitalism, particularly, is in the consumerism and the materialism. But that's not inherently a problem of capitalism. That's a problem of mindset.
Yeah.
If I view the act of getting money as a way to just have more for myself and not as a way to enrich my community and myself in the process, that's where it tends to start having what you would see as negative consequences or negative experiences. But the pure act of creating resources and making a difference for you and others, like, more power to you. You want to do Uber and Lyft and have a more non-traditional, let's call it, way of operating, great. I mean,
Yeah.
hell, excuse my language, podcast is a great example of this is something that wouldn't have been available otherwise. And podcasts create great content for people.
Yeah. Excellent. How can people get a hold of you and find you and follow you, etc.?
Probably the best way is via, okay, sorry, Gen Zers, I'm old school, right? I'm building my web presence, I promise. But in the meantime, Facebook is probably the place I'm most active with posting and interacting and whatnot. So just search Thomas Blattenberger. What's nice about my last name is there's not many of me. So you just search Thomas Blattenberger on any of the social media platforms and you'll find me. Otherwise, you want to shoot an email directly, just thomas@paradigmshiftfinancial.com. And I'm pretty sure my company name's going to be in the show notes, right? So they can figure out how to spell paradigm.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Like I picked paradigm and I was pretty excited about it. And then I get on phone calls and people never pronounce it paradigm. And it makes me very sad.
Yeah. Thank you for a very engaging conversation, and you have a very engaging personality. And I really enjoyed talking with you, and keep up the great work.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.